You're an agribusiness executive navigating an increasingly competitive market while trying to grow your company. Mergers and acquisitions are pitched as an accelerant to growth, but many M&A deals destroy more value than they create. Welcome to the Pacesetter Pod, where we explore and reveal the perspectives, insights, and approaches for successful mergers and acquisitions. Here's your host, the Integration Pacesetter, Joe Mosher.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pacesetter Pod. As always, I am your host, Joe Mosher, founder and principal advisor of the Mosher Consulting Group. Mosher Consulting Group works exclusively with small to middle market food and agribusiness firms to de-risk strategy and strengthen M&A readiness to produce better results in less time and with less disruption. I appreciate you joining today. When a business is on the cusp of an M&A transaction, particularly if that business is not a serial acquirer that does deals on a regular basis, one of the biggest questions on leaders' minds is how long is this integration going to take? And the answer to that is the universally unsatisfying answer of it depends. And the reason it depends is that there's so many variables that come into place when you're talking about a post-M&A integration. And some of those variables are, just for example, is this a merger or is this an integration? Because the answer to that will imply very different focus areas and scope of change. How big and how complex are the two companies that are coming together? Are these traditional nose-to-nose competitors that have similar offerings, similar processes, similar infrastructure, where maybe the perceived integration will be relatively low complexity and easy to execute? Or are these adjacent businesses, perhaps in the same vertical, the same supply chain, that have little to no direct overlap? What are the integration assumptions? So is the goal to fully integrate 100% of all aspects of the business? Or is maybe the goal limited to integrating just your back office processes and the external facing products, branding, sales channels, etc., websites would all maintain as separate entities? Or is the goal simply to roll up financials and operate this new business that's been purchased largely as an independent function? Has the leadership team that's in place done an M&A deal before? That has a big impact on how long it might take. Is this a friendly transaction? Two buyers and sellers willfully and excitedly coming together? Is it hostile? Is it a business bought at auction? Or is maybe the seller in trouble and is really selling at a discount as a distressed business? How much do you know about the seller's operating model? How much do you know about the seller's systems and processes? How much do you know about your systems and processes? Are they clear? Are they documented? Are your processes ready for integration? So you get the point. There's a lot of things that you need to know before you can precisely answer that question. And I can give you a general time frame of what you should expect in your integrations. And we're going to definitely cover that today. But I think it's really important to know that when you're asking those questions up front, you're looking for directional answers at best. Prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And similarly here, there are so many variables to control for that the best way to know and to shorten your integration duration is to assess and then control for those variables. But there are some universal truths when it comes to M&A integrations within the food and agribusiness world. One of them is that integrations don't last forever. They just feel that way. And this is largely due to the unpreparedness among acquirers. And precisely, that's why we invested in this podcast, to help acquirers become more prepared for more effective integrations in shorter time with better results. And presumably, that's why you're listening today, because you don't want to be among the unprepared going into an M&A deal. Another universal truth would be that integrations are taxing, yes or yes, but it's the uncertainty that takes the greatest toll. People can endure a lot of discomfort when they know it's temporary. It's when the suffering seems to have no end in sight that your people, your customers, and your businesses will start to pull apart at the seams. And frankly, integration scheduling is too often a top-down effort, when in reality, the only way it can happen correctly is from the bottom up. So as leaders, we can set a goal that the integrations can be complete in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, or 18, or whatever that might be. But if it's not rooted in good work estimation and understanding of change impacts and the proper sequencing of the work and the complexity of that work, it's not going to hold up to scrutiny. Your plan won't be worth the paper that it's written on. And if you set an aggressive goal from the top and frankly, things seem to be going seamlessly on track, you might have another problem in your hands. You ought to be wondering what else is not getting attention in your business. Because if people are going all in on an overly aggressive, unscientifically estimated integration plan, you might be losing focus on your customers. You might stop paying attention to receivables or inventory quality, or maybe working capital management and liquidity, or even housekeeping in your facilities. And all of these things create a long tail of risk that you probably didn't intend and certainly didn't plan for. So while those are some general thoughts to help get you started, I do want to dig in a little bit deeper today on 3 things that you need to know as you begin developing and then managing your post-integration schedule. The first is that you simply cannot start planning too early. So all of the literature on mergers and acquisitions, and I sincerely mean all of it, is going to say the same thing. It's going to say that there's only reward in starting early, and there's only penalty and pain in delaying. And the literature will also comment on what causes that delay. It's not just a failure to focus on integration, but sometimes the delay is because there's some very real commercial or legal sensitivities in the early parts of a deal life cycle. Not everyone's allowed to be on the deal team. Not everyone gets to come into the tent. Not everyone should get access to the data room, and not everyone's going to be involved in the due diligence process. Those barriers notwithstanding, strong leaders with the foresight to know that getting the deal done is going to be comparatively straightforward compared to managing the integrations, they apply pressure to getting things moving early. And so what is early? In my point of view, the real scheduling of the integration should be derived from the scope of the integration. Again, whether this is a complete 100% integration, if this is partial, if this is going to be operating as independent, what are the commercial, operational, and financial objectives of the deal? What do they tell us about what the integration should look like? And then from there, we can start doing a much better job of estimating what work has to happen to make that come true, and how long will that work take based on who and how many people need to be involved. So when you take the scope of the integration and then you layer it with what you know about your business and the target business, you start to get into a little bit of a better spot. So ideally, integration discussions are underway before a letter of intent is ever issued or signed. And discussions at this point may only be exploratory, but asking about the scheduling and sequencing questions now in the very early stages is going to set the tone throughout the rest of the M&A lifecycle. It's going to set the tone that this isn't just about getting the deal done. This is also about making sure that we can get the value from the deal, and that comes via effective integration planning. If you're not able to look at integration or talk about integration at this early stage, at the letter of intent stage, or perhaps you've been past the LOI signing stage, you have to start during due diligence. And again, I'm not saying that everyone involved in integration planning will need to be on the deal team or is going to need full access. But if you allow due diligence to run its course, and the first time you start thinking about integration is in that critical sign to close phase, you're setting yourself up for a self-inflicted wound. That sign to close phase is actually a sprint. This is when all the final financing and underwriting is going to be occurring. This is when the attorneys are going to be redlining all the legal entity structures and details. It's going to be when you're trying to get your day one plans in place. Who are we going to hire? How are we going to hire them? What's this going to look like? Do they have phone numbers? Do they have emails? Do they have computers? Do we have a desk for them? You need to have started beforehand. Something I hear very often is that if you start this early, say during the LOI phase or even early due diligence, if you start this early, that you're going to make the wrong decision as due diligence proceeds and as more is learned. As synergy and opportunity targets come into focus, you're going to have made all these decisions up front, which now don't reflect what's in front of you. But I don't personally see this as an issue, because starting early with scheduling discussions and planning discussions does not mean deciding early. What you're doing is you're gathering data. You're gathering perspectives on what the focus areas are, what effort they're going to require, and really what the duration of that effort is likely to be. You're really arming yourself, I'd say, almost with a preliminary plan that you can then revise over time. At this early stage, early due diligence or even LOI, the objective is to frame up the integration, the efforts and the demands, determine what other inputs you need, and then start to have that two-way feedback of questions and answers and ideas between the due diligence team and the integration team. So again, you cannot start integration planning too early. The second point is that all integrations end. Might not feel like it, but they all end, usually though with a whimper.
Poorly executed mergers and acquisitions destroy more value than they create. They can set your company back years. To defend your firm's position in the marketplace, you need access to the leading practices that unlock the greater potential of your people, processes, and systems. If you are undertaking a company transformation or pursuing an acquisition as a vehicle to grow, set up a call with Joe by visiting www.moshercg.com.
So integrations are periods of high intensity. There's no doubt about it. But that intensity itself is volatile. And there's going to be periods of, say, tremendous stress on the business, and then also this strange relative calm. So kind of think of it as peaks and troughs, or high tide and low tide. Your day one plan and your 90 or 100-day plan are likely to be the ones with the peak activity. And this is because at that point in time, you're so early in the integration execution phase that you're going to have very few wins under your belt. And you're going to be mostly spending your time looking at the enormity of the work that's left, that's yet undone, still staring you in the face. But with a well-defined day one plan, you pile up a few wins, you put people and customers a little more at ease, you're going to signal the direction that things are going, and you're going to be planting the seeds of confidence that this is going to work. We know what we're doing. We have a plan. This deal was the right one for our business at the right time. It enables our strategy. And there's intentionality and discipline to how we're doing this. And then before you know it, you're going to be at the day 90 or 100 mark. In terms of day 90 versus 100, some people like one of those over the others. I have lots of strong opinions on M&A in ag. This is not one of them. I don't have a strong opinion on this, other than to say this kind of near to midterm landmark, like a 90-day plan or a 100-day plan, is healthy. It's healthy because it allows you to assess the progress that you've made relative to this point in your plan. You can celebrate some wins. You're going to be able to recalibrate on work that is slipping. And just overall, you'll be able to reevaluate your plan because you're going to know so much more 3 months in than you knew the day that the deal closed and you were handed the keys. So in terms of a general integration time frame, this is my common rule. Be suspicious of anything less than 6 months and challenge anything longer than a year. This is not scientific. It's based on experience, but I think it's effective. For an integration to be done in less than 6 months, a couple things have to be true. It has to be a relatively small business, has to be relatively low complexity, has to be relatively similar to the business that acquired it. The acquiring business has to be a skilled and experienced acquirer, not a first-time deal maker, and they likely need to have a proven process in place. If one or more of those are missing, then I would question at the 6th month mark, if everything seems done, whether all the work you set out to do actually got done, or if all the work you set out to do was actually a complete list of the work that needed to get done. Similarly, integrations longer than a year tend to get diminishing returns from my perspective. And it can be symptomatic of a couple of things. The main one being that non-pure integration work starts to slide into integration scopes over time. So it's not uncommon, for example, during an integration for the need for a new ERP to come to the surface and for someone to start building that into the plan. ERP, of course, being enterprise resource planning. Think of Oracle or SAP or the large financial inventory sales applications that many businesses operate from, kind of the core application technology platform for the business. In this case, when this comes to the surface, a new ERP coming into the integration plan, the question is, for me, was this a need? Was this need for technology updates a pre-existing condition? Should you have been looking at that yes or yes, whether you did the deal? Or is it truly only needed because you did the deal? The reason this is important is if you let those really big and strategic and important opportunities that are highlighted during integration slip into your plan's going to continue in perpetuity. And it might really become more of a business improvement plan or a business optimization plan and not really integration focused. And the thing to remember is don't do that. You need to keep it scoped to what does it take to bring these two companies together to deliver the value that was outlined in the business case, that was codified in our minimum viable integration, and that was done and designed to support and delight our customers. There is a place for all the additional work that you're going to highlight, the additional opportunities you're going to highlight along the way. We'll talk about that in a minute, but you need to carefully guard the scope of your integration and make sure that non-pure integration opportunities don't start to slide into the plan. And the last point on this one here is that integrations also don't have a uniform end. So think about it. Some work streams like HR are going to be really intense up front. But once you've hired all the new elevator operators and grain originators, once you've done the benefits cutover, once you've had the onboarding and the safety training, and you've updated all of your HR policies and procedures, that work is done. And the HR work stream also might be done. And in the meantime, perhaps finance and IT and operations and risk management and other aspects of your business, they're going to continue to work along. And then a couple months later, perhaps is when you start a new work stream. So it may not be until 6 months in that you start to think about, okay, now is when we're going to create our new integrated process for consolidating capital investment strategy, because we now have a dozen new facilities under our corporate structure. Or maybe you wait till the end of your fiscal year when you start to put a new integrated merchandising, trading, and position management system in place. The point is that you'll be firing in all directions in the beginning of your integration, and then there will be a natural tapering effect over time as some work streams complete their scopes and fewer live integrations are underway. And I call this the Whimper Effect. The Whimper Effect can make the completion of integration feel somewhat anticlimactic, which means it's important as ever to celebrate and recognize those teams as they finish their components of the plan, and then keep communicating about the work that remains to be done. Think about integrations as a loaf of bread. If the integration is not properly monitored, if it's not in the right packaging, if it's not perhaps refrigerated if necessary, if it's just left on the counter, open to the air, neglected, it's going to age like bread. It's not going to age like wine. Integrations left alone to their own devices don't increase in value over time and become more desirable. There's no one with bragging rights about their vintage 4-year-old integration. And that brings us to our third and final point today. Yes, integration completion is an end, but it's also a beginning. As we talked about earlier, when you're in the middle of an integration, you're going to uncover, or maybe just be reminded of, literally countless needs, gaps, or opportunities to improve your operations, things that can drive profitability, things that will just generally make you a more effective business. And this is normal, and this is natural, and it's expected. In fact, if you're not uncovering additional ways to improve your business, you might not be applying enough pressure. Or worse yet, you might have people pencil whipping your integration plan. They're focused on getting the work done and putting on blinders to all the really compelling opportunities that they're stumbling upon along the way. So some common examples of what I see time and again in this respect are people will say, wow, we've done this integration, but we really need to improve this process, whatever that process might be. Or they might say, we need to have a process for this. Or again, we need to reevaluate our technology needs. We need to think about how this could be automated. Maybe we've identified work that can be done by a qualified third party, work that you don't need your internal people to do because you don't add unique value doing it. And there's a service provider that could do it for less money, less cost, higher reliability. Or maybe you'll even say, the way we were structured before the deal doesn't make sense anymore. We've hired and onboarded all of our new team members, but it feels like we shoehorned those people into departments in the structure that we have, not the one that we need. And so like any maturing business with a big strategy and a big change, it's going to take time to reach stable operations. And when you really think about it, it's never really stable, as there's always something that could be done more efficiently or effectively. So this makes it all the more important that you celebrate the end of the integration, but that you do so in the context of saying we are now accelerating into our next S-curve of growth. You and your team are going to need the emotional release of hitting the milestone. People need to declare victory. They need to enjoy the moment. But when the integration is complete, you're left with an entirely new business. A business that's unlike either the one that you had or the one that the seller had before you guys came together. And so as much as closing the integration is the end, it's also the beginning of something new and exciting. So let's recap what we covered today. First, you cannot start integration planning too early. If you want to know how long it's going to take, start working on how long it's going to take. That's the best way to get the answer that you need. All integrations end, but they end unevenly and with a whimper. And with that whimper, there's risk. There are standard bookends to integration timelines, but they're subject to many variables. Again, remember, question anything less than 6 months and challenge anything longer than 12. And closing the integration is a new beginning for a new business. So today it's been really hard for me to decouple all the talk of schedules from the details of what goes into the schedules, what work is to be done, who does it, how you manage it, etc. But I do hope that this has provided you with some new insights and angles to think about, think through how best to tackle your own question of how long is this going to take. After today, I also hope that you have a new appreciation for the emotional and organizational importance that goes into officially closing your integration. And this is not a 2-part episode, but I do encourage you to join us in the next episode where we're going to talk more about how to properly close your integration. It's not about a checklist, a punch list, or a sheet cake, though all those are important. This is about how you can do some simple things that will not only reap the rewards of declaring victory and celebrating the win, but also checking back to your original deal objectives and seeing if you delivered what was expected, see how you're going to measure going forward, and see how you can harness all that you learned and uncovered to invest and continue to push in the momentum of your business. Remember that M&A is not a strategy. It's a tool for strategy, and strategy is a vehicle for growth. And all that you've learned and uncovered needs to stay above the waterline as you continue to grow your business post-integration. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about and how you can do it. So thank you for listening to today's episode of the Pacesetter Pod. I invite you to follow me, Joe Mosher, and the Mosher Consulting Group on LinkedIn, where we regularly post ideas, observations, and reflections to help you win at executing strategy and M&A in your food or agribusiness. And of course, I encourage you to hit subscribe on your podcast player so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. And if you like what you heard, we'd love it if you left a review. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a safe day.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.